Voices around Garden Creek and Mount Pisgah. Period. Opinions 1840-1920. Voices around Garden Creek 1840-1920. This report follows the opinions in the attached documents from the 19th century into the early 20th. It is not a verdict. It is a listening exercise. Who believed, who doubted, who warned, who classified, and who tried to keep the record from collapsing into one slogan, all real or all fake. The strongest pattern is not one voice winning. It is a dispute moving from field collection to public wonder to expert skepticism to institutional allegation and finally to the need for object-by-object review. 1871-1882. Speyer and the Masonic Overreading. The first strong period opinion in these files is J. Mason Speyer's interpretation of the Micocks Mound near Johns River. His excavation account describes seeded burials, red paint, beads, stone celts, and a Smithsonian route through H.C. Yarrow. The burial description matters, but his conclusion that the grave proved native possession of Masonic mysteries is an overreading. The modern source card grades the burial and Smithsonian pipeline as strong, while grading the Masonic claim as unsupported. This is the first lesson of the whole file. Accurate observation can be followed by a wrong interpretive frame. 1879-1881. Valentine and Osborne build a collection chain. Next come Valentine and Osborne. Man Valentine asked A.J. and Mary Osborne for objects, labels, source details, and careful packing. The chain of custody report treats this as a real 19th century transfer chain. Local finders and landowners, Osborne at Garden Creek, boxes and kegs, freight routes through Asheville and the Pigeon River, then Richmond and the Valentine Museum. But Osborne also dismissed hunters for attempted counterfeits. That makes his opinion complex. He was not saying everything was genuine. He was trying to separate finds from imitations inside a noisy collecting environment. 1880. Chief Bushyhead and the Rainmaking Statement. One of the most important opinions is attributed to Chief Bushyhead in 1880. Valentine reported that Bushyhead said images in the western North Carolina mountains were known and used by medicine men to bring rain. The report treats this carefully. It is strong cultural corroboration for an artifact class and its native interpretation before the Smithsonian dispute hardened. But it is not automatic proof that every individual carving is ancient. In the video of these documents, Bushyhead is the voice that says, "Do not dismiss the image class too quickly." 1882. Keene, Rowe, Valentine, and Ammi. In 1882 the debate becomes public and scholarly. Keene's notice presents the Mount Pisgah objects as remarkable, possibly tied to ancient or non-local traditions. Rowe answers with expert caution. The sculptures did not fit his experience of genuine North American antiquities, and he warned that ethnological speculation on them would be hazardous. Valentine pushes back from Paris. His point is not final proof. It is a methodological challenge. Rowe had not seen the full range. Repeated traits might define a type, and visual abnormality alone is not proof of fabrication. Ammi then enters as a moderating European reader. He rejects the most sensational ancient civilization reading, but he does not simply adopt a fraud conclusion. He leaves room for comparatively modern production by tribes in the Carolinas in contact with whites. 1883-1885. Emmert, Thomas, and Institutional Suspicion. The next voice is institutional. The Smithsonian side papers bring in Emmert, McChesney, Cyrus Thomas, ledgers, receipts, and vouchers. The documents show official handling and controversy, but they do not by themselves prove the whole later fabrication story. 4 Haywood County objects were later reported as accessioned in 1884 by Cyrus Thomas with similar items catalogued as imitation carvings. Ledger language, such as imitation of Indian carving, is powerful evidence of classification. Yet the report insists on the boundary. Classification is not the same as material proof. It tells us what the institution recorded and believed. It does not date every object. 1885. Rowe writes to Ammi. In 1885, Rowe's position becomes much stronger. He tells Ami that Smithsonian inquiry had found men who admitted making similar figures, and that pseudo-antiquities had been made, paid for, and held by the National Museum. Ami later repeats or accepts the language of white forgers. Historically, that matters. It shows European scholarly reception of the Smithsonian fraud narrative. But the updated Ami Rowe paper is careful. Ami's 1885 note depends on Rowe's letter. It is not independent field proof. The strongest language remains alleged, reported, later asserted, reclassified, and contested, not proved for the entire corpus. 1886-1887, Valentine, Burnett, and the witness Hunt. Valentine's later inquiry letters show that the allegation was contested in real time. He sought affidavits and asked about Burnett, Miller, David Burnett, Stringfield, Makers, signatures, and whether the Smithsonian had actually proved what it claimed. Burnett appears in these attachments mainly as a witness and provenance problem rather than as a clean, quoted opinion. That itself matters. The Burnett thread is not a settled confession in these supplied documents. It is part of the evidentiary battlefield. Signatures, makers, receipts, and missing letter bodies all still need object-specific control. 1881, Osborne and the Jasper Allen Mound. The London album No. 61 note gives a different kind of opinion. Not a brand theory, but a provenance argument. The ledger identifies a steelite bowl from Jasper Allen Mound, and Osborne's December 1881 field letter independently reports opening Jasper Allen's Mound on Scott's Creek. The note calls this the strongest find spot provenance in the steelite series. Yet it keeps the boundary clear. Provenance can be strong while authenticity remains a separate question. A find spot tells us where the object was recorded from. Material sourcing, tooling, use where, and context decide the manufacturing question. 1900. Nina Rodriguez and the ritual object problem. Nina Rodriguez belongs to 1900, inside the requested period, but outside native North America. His text uses a dated colonial and racial framework that should not be adopted. The attached comparison file uses him only for one limited anthropological problem. How ordinary materials become charged as charms, talismans, fetishes, offerings, or prepared things within a ritual system. The calibration rule is crucial. Do not call an object a charm or ritual object merely because it has marks. The controlling evidence is preparation, ritual fixing, offerings, chain of custody, and community interpretation. Images, animals, pipes, and later comparators. The later Matthews comparison is outside 1840 to 1920, but it helps structure the visual part of the film. Matthews is useful because it defines a published class of multiple image Iroquoian pipes, with categories like multiple human, side by side, and humans with animal skin. The Mount Pisgah images do not prove a classic Janus pipe. The safer comparison is broader. Multiple humans, paired beings, human-animal combinations, marked bodies, bears, birds, and possible headgear or transformation grammar. These images are not proof. They are leads that must be linked to material, context, and chain of custody. The verdict of the opinions. When the voices are placed in order, the result is sharper than a simple argument. Speyer shows how a real find can be overinterpreted. Valentine and Osborne show a real collection chain, but also counterfeit risk. Bushyhead gives cultural corroboration for rainmaking images, but not blanket authentication. Keene amplifies wonder. Rowe warns, and later alleges fabrication. Ami moderates the ancient civilization claim, then receives Rowe's fraud narrative. Emmert and Thomas show an institutional stream of vouchers, accessions, and imitation labels. Burnett remains a witness problem, not a settled verdict. The strongest conclusion is disciplined. The corpus has a serious historical and institutional chain, but each disputed object requires its own proof. Closing. That is the story these attachments tell. The argument should not be reduced to romance, hoax, or museum decree. The period opinions form a historical record of disagreement. The documents preserve belief, skepticism, cultural memory, institutional suspicion, catalog labels, missing evidence, and the constant pressure to overstate. A responsible narrative keeps those tensions visible. It honors the native landscape as real, respects the archival chain as meaningful, and refuses to let any single 19th century opinion replace object by object science.